Tonight, we begin with a decision that Pentagon officials had anticipated, intelligence analysts had debated, and the White House had accelerated in the final hours of this extraordinary week. A decision that unfolded not over months of deliberation, but in a matter of days. Days that changed the trajectory of this conflict. Days that sent shockwaves through the Kremlin. Days that fundamentally altered what Ukraine can now do on the battlefield. What Vladimir Putin did this week crossed a line that Western leaders had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, the United States did not hesitate. They responded with speed, with precision, and with a weapons package that military analysts are calling among the most significant since the war began. You see, there are moments in geopolitical conflicts when rhetoric gives way to reality. When the carefully calibrated dance of deterrence and escalation suddenly lurches in a new direction. This week, we witnessed one of those moments. And the response from Washington was not what Moscow expected. Not even close. For weeks now, there had been signals, not official announcements from the State Department, not formal declarations from NATO headquarters, just signals that the Kremlin was preparing something unprecedented. Vladimir Putin has been aggressive, yes, but he has been predictable in his aggression. His moves have followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a choreography that Western intelligence agencies had learned to read. The troop movements along the border, the sudden exercises announced at odd hours, the diplomatic theatrics designed to create confusion, the state media propaganda cycles that telegraph Moscow's intentions days before they materialize. But what set off alarm bells in Washington this week was that the pattern went silent. Intelligence officials who monitor Russian military communications know the indicators. The encrypted burst transmissions between command centers, the satellite imagery showing equipment being moved under cover of darkness, the unusual activity at nuclear-capable facilities, the sudden repositioning of air defense systems, all of that went quiet. And whenever the Kremlin goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. You have to understand, and I've reported on this extensively, that Russia's military apparatus operates on a certain frequency. There's a background noise of activity that analysts have learned to interpret. Increased chatter means something is brewing. Decreased chatter means something is imminent. This week, the chatter didn't just decrease, it stopped. And that silence spoke volumes to the professionals whose job it is to anticipate Russian moves before they happen. Early Thursday morning, U.S. intelligence agencies detected what they described as significant repositioning of strategic assets, including long-range missile systems that had not been moved from their storage facilities in over 18 months. These are the kinds of weapon systems that Russia only deploys when they are signaling something very specific. Preparation for a major offensive, a response to perceived Western escalation, or a demonstration of capability designed to intimidate. Analysts at the Pentagon didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Putin was changing his posture. And when a nuclear-armed adversary shifts posture without explanation, even by a small measure, everyone pays attention. The intelligence was brought directly to the White House Situation Room. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan convened an emergency meeting that lasted, according to sources familiar with the discussion, well past midnight. What emerged from that meeting was a decision that had been debated for months, but never fully authorized. Until now. The secret weapons package, and I want to be careful here about what has been officially confirmed versus what remains classified, includes capabilities that Ukraine has been requesting since the earliest days of the invasion. These aren't just more of the same. These are game changers. And the timing of their approval tells us everything we need to know about what Washington observed in Moscow this week. The statement issued by the Department of Defense tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Official after official described Putin's latest moves as destabilizing, provocative, and perhaps most importantly, indicative of a leader operating from desperation rather than strength. But intimidation only works if the target hesitates. The United States did not. In fact, the response announced today was among the most comprehensive military aid packages we've seen since February 2022. Here's what we know. Within 48 hours of detecting the Russian repositioning, the White House authorized the immediate transfer of advanced weapons systems These weren't the standard artillery shells and armored vehicles that have characterized previous packages. These were precision strike capability systems that the United States only provides when they are preparing to fundamentally alter the balance of power on the battlefield. I want to be specific about this because the details matter. The package includes long-range ATACMS missiles with extended-range capabilities. It includes advanced counter-drone systems that can neutralize the Iranian-made Shahed drones that have terrorized Ukrainian cities. It includes sophisticated electronic warfare equipment that can jam Russian communications. And this is the significant part. It includes intelligence sharing protocols that will give Ukraine real-time targeting data from American satellites. That last element is what has Moscow genuinely concerned, because you can provide weapons all day long, but providing the eyes to use them effectively, that's a different category entirely. Tonight, Pentagon officials confirmed that Ukrainian forces have already begun integrating these new capabilities into their operations, including strikes on logistics hubs that had recently been reinforced for what analysts believe was a planned winter offensive. Ukraine struck before Russia could consolidate. They hit ammunition depots in occupied Luhansk. They hit command centers in Donetsk that coordinate Russian operations across the Eastern Front. They hit fuel storage facilities that were likely preparing to support armored advances. In other words, Ukraine targeted the infrastructure of escalation, the logistical foundation that would have made a major Russian push operational. This is what made the White House's decision so urgent. Putin's repositioning wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. It represented the kind of preparation that could overwhelm Ukrainian defenses if left unchecked. And Ukraine, understanding that fully, responded with force, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't waste these new capabilities on symbolic targets. They didn't broadcast their intentions through preliminary strikes. They hit the right targets at the right time with the right weapons. And the results, according to Ukrainian military officials speaking tonight, exceeded expectations. Multiple Russian logistics nodes have been degraded or destroyed. Communication lines have been disrupted. And the timeline for whatever operation Putin was planning has been, at minimum, significantly delayed. This is what precision warfare looks like when a determined defender receives the tools they need. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. Intelligence analysts now believe that Putin's latest moves were designed to test the resolve of Western allies after months of public debates about aid fatigue and political divisions. Putin wanted to see whether the West would fracture under pressure. He wanted to see whether congressional gridlock in Washington would translate to hesitation on the battlefield. He wanted to see whether the approaching American election cycle would paralyze decision-making. But instead, the opposite happened. The Biden administration didn't hesitate. They authorized a response that was so swift, so comprehensive, that even seasoned Kremlin watchers were surprised. You don't get Vladimir Putin's attention easily. But today, the United States did. Senior defense officials speaking with multiple news outlets under anonymity described Putin's expected reaction as recalibration, a way to adjust to a new reality that he didn't anticipate. But the United States proved today that they remain both committed and capable. Their actions were not only decisive, they were coordinated so precisely that Ukraine received targeting assistance simultaneously with the weapons to act on that intelligence. That synchronization matters because it shows something important about American capabilities. It shows that the United States is not merely a supplier of weapons. They are an active partner in this defense. And that partnership is what Putin fears most, because he can count weapons. He can calculate ammunition supplies. What he cannot easily counter is the full weight of American intelligence and military expertise being placed at Ukraine's disposal. This week, that weight became tangible. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Ukraine's response using these new capabilities. Ukrainian Air Force units carried out precision strikes on Russian positions, forcing evacuations from forward operating bases that had been established just weeks ago.